where
Sorry.
that's okay. It was always envisioned to be more than a hotel, more than a spa, more than just a gym, more than a place where you sign up, you go to your fitness class, you get sweaty, you go home. It was meant to be a place where you learn something, and you learn through experiencing things, you learn through seeing things, you learn through doing things. So this moment, this lecture is an opportunity to give you a taste of what we want to share with our guests. It's an experience where you get to learn something. We try to make it as personal and relatable as possible. We try and distill the science down so that you can actually walk away with some learnings. In the past, we've given these lectures at headquarters in Santa Monica. So this is our first time doing it at property. I hope it's not the last. I hope it's the first in many lecture series. And the topic of today's lecture is emotion. You guys are familiar with the Sensei way. It's been simplified to movement and rest, but it's much more than that. The emotional experience of a wellness retreat has always been at the forefront of our minds when we created Sensei. And we undertook this research to start giving us some language to talk about emotion and how we're feeling and how that factors into a wellness retreat experience. When we think about, and before I jump into the meat of this, I wanted to give you a little bit of just the agenda, just so you can keep some things in mind over the next 40 minutes that Teague and I walk through some of it. The first is I want to share a little bit about why Sensei should address emotion. There's a rationale, there's a methodology behind why we pick these projects and why we develop the program. So I want to share some of that with you. And then I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. I'm going to develop a fantastic methodology for talking about emotions. Stephen is a seasoned psychologist, and she has done a wealth of research even before she joined Sensei. I've been picking her brain since January about how do we speak about emotions, how do we address well-being, what are all the methodologies out in the world, and what's the best one? And of all the research, she not only identified the best one, but identified a new way that we can measure well-being and emotions. So she's going to talk us through the Sensei approach, how we're going to do it here, the key scientific breakthroughs, which are really takeaways from you, bits of science and bits of research that you can take home and hopefully apply to your own personal lives. And then we're going to get tactical. We're going to get real into the nitty-gritty and talk about some of the classes, some of the experiences, and what can we actually do to deliver this experience to kids. Just a frame of reference. If you don't feel like your emotions link to your well-being, I have some news for you. I like to make the argument for why these things matter through science, and especially through the impact on the health. This was a study that was done in the UK. 11,000 adults, and they measured their mortality, and how long they lived and what they're dying from over a number of years, up to 100 months from when they did the survey. But in the survey that they were asking these adults, they asked really what you might think of as soft, fluffy things about your sense of control. I feel that what happens to me is out of my control. And then they asked these adults to respond on a scale. Their sense of autonomy. I feel like I can do what I please. The last two dimensions were purpose. I feel that my life has meaning, and self-acceptance. I feel satisfied with the way my life has turned out. These are feeling statements. These are emotional statements. These are perspectives. These are beliefs. And what we saw is that if you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, the people that rated themselves the highest, that felt the most fulfilled in all of these areas, ended up living longer, years and years after they answered these questions. You can see in this graph, so the highest well-being quartile is in blue, and the lowest well-being quartile is in red. They're not showing the breadth that it's visible to the human eye, but there's a difference. There's a difference in what happens to us in the future based on what we're feeling and thinking now. So that's the first eye opener. But we have to think about what we're doing now for our guests. We have to think about and make sure that we're setting them up for a long, healthy life in the future. Okay. The second part about our emotions is that if you, perchance, have an emotional problem, it's very unclear where you go to deal with it and where you go to get an answer for them. If you went to a psychotherapist, you might get one dimension of emotional health. You get some counseling, you'll get some cognitive behavioral therapy. If you went to a psychiatrist, you'll get some psychoanalysis and you'll get a diagnosis. If you went to a sports performance coach, you're going to get some performance coaching, you get some information about mindset and performance. If you had an interpersonal issue and you went to a marital counselor, you get some marital counseling and group therapy. Spiritual dimension. If you're searching for connection and meaning and a sense of purpose in your life, if you can go to a religious leader, you can go to the woods, you can go to the soul cycle. Like all of these places fill this void in our lives, and yet they're fragmented and disconnected. And so it's hard as an individual when you're searching for emotional well-being to navigate these waters on our own. Far too often, we try to help ourselves, and self-help literature just continues to proliferate. There are gurus, self-help gurus every year. There's a new one trending almost every month. Tons of books that we think we should read, our friends are telling us we should read, that we need to read, that we feel like we ought to be following. Most of these books are actually very prescriptive, in meaning that they tell you these are things that are good that you should do and things that are bad. And even that perpetuates feelings of guilt within us. As of 2016, this is one research that we looked at all of the scientific literature around the world. There were 99 different ways to measure well-being across 196 dimensions. And I share that just to show you how fragmented both the psychology as well as the popular psychology, what's available to you on countable source. Okay. I wish I had a virtual drum roll. Thank you. So with all of that data, the Tegan and the wellness science team have been working diligently to put all these pieces together to create something that addresses these gaps in emotional well-being, that can help our guests pave a path forward. And we're going to share some of that with you so that you can actually understand how it is your personal life. And the sneak peek, I wanted to make sure I share a little bit of the punchline, is that of all of this research, of all of the theories and evidence from psychology, Tegan has been able to distill it down so succinctly, which is part of the beauty of this. There's three core concepts that she's going to articulate today, and she's going to share how they relate to you, but also how they relate to our guests and experiences. Those core concepts are rejuvenation, regulation, and connection. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Tegan.
So we'll get into each of those a little bit more: rejuvenation, regulation, and connection. And one of the reasons why we really want to get into these is because it's part of our founder story. It's part of where Sensei came from. Larry Ellison will tell the story about how he was in a beautiful Japanese garden, and he was in a tour group and maybe supposed to be there for 15 minutes and ended up staying the whole day, because this beautiful nature and art around him pulled him in. And that touches on a real tangible component of what our guests experience here in these beautiful grounds, seeing the dream catcher by the experience specialist desk and the beautiful art here. There's something that we feel when we can connect in this way. And turns out there's science behind it. So when we're talking about these feelings, this is what some psychologists, part of the fragment, will call bottom up. And so there's a lot of work out there on bottom up regulation and ways that we can improve our body to improve our mind. We can go for a jog and we get endorphins. This is often something we talk about a lot. There's also top down, which is a lot of the cognitive therapies, and our model covers all of it. And it does so by understanding the body a little bit more. So we have something called affect, affect is the feeling before emotion. It's the gut reaction. It's when we walk into a room and you can cut the tension with a knife. And so affect is really coming up through this system. It's called the vagus nerve. And sometimes our body appraises what is going on before it even gets to our brain. And that's important because our body gives us signals, and things like our heart rate and our breathing and our chemical processes in the brain are controlled before we even think through a lot of it. But then we also have thought, and thought happens in the brain. And because we're science and evidence-based, I'm going to give you some introductions to the brain, but I'll try to skip over the boring stuff and give you a lecture on it later. The reason why this really matters is that our bodies are trying to optimize. Our bodies are giving us signals and trying to allow us to be optimal in our environments. So some of you may have heard that excitement and worry physiologically are very similar or exactly the same in the body. This is one way to kind of start to understand this. But we have this very narrow center space where optimal really works in our environments. Some people will talk about evolution and how we used to run from tigers, and that we're running from tigers all the time. But really what we can really look at when we distilled all of the research, our team, we saw that there is underuse and overuse, and that there are these red zones that we can get into. And one way that I like to think about the red zones is that sometimes things are okay, but all the time we start to get into the red zone. What we do with our programs and the experience at Sensei is we allow for our threshold to widen and for optimal behavior or our body's signals to give us more. And we do that through these 3 paths. To talk a little bit about rejuvenation, you can see affect, we've talked about it in the body. Rebounding is something, or being resilient is something we talk about that's both top down and bottom up. And then sleep is all things. And someday I'll talk about that. So an example of this is we have, when we are talking about affect or emotion, we generally have these 2 sort of things that we feel. Either we're stuck in an emotion or we're avoiding it. And the center space that we're trying to expand is being able to address situations and then to move on. And we see this more with this idea of resilience. And this is something that we on one-on-one work a lot with guests on, is how to appropriately acknowledge and address the situation. And then we can also see both sides of the spectrum with sleep. And so emotion, resilience, and sleep shows up in all of our programs. In our one-on-one sessions, we can work with guests on things like neuroocular training so that they understand their daily habits more. And then we can work on sleep regimens or routines that they can pull in. And what's awesome is that we can then, maybe during a turn down service, customize their turn down service and bring the lavender tea that we, lavender tea is actually not a good idea, but the tea in the session to their room. We also have classes that work in these 3 areas. We have things like restorative yoga that really help us understand how we can start to bring rejuvenation into our day-to-day lives. So that's one edge of our triangle. The next is regulation. And regulation is something that we talk about a lot in the cognitive space, but it's really important to know that this is a really embodied process, and that when we're connecting and expanding, we can do a whole lot more. Stress modulation is probably one of the most common discussion points. And we often think to ourselves, today I'm lazy, or that I have to go and keep going and keep going. And again, sometimes it's okay to watch Netflix all day, Or sometimes it's okay to go and have a clock in front of you that is helping you do that.
Just turn this a little.
It's okay sometimes. And it's okay for some of us more than for others. And so this whole system is a way for our guests to reflect on what their red zones is and are, and how their red zone interacts with their environment. In the context is really the answer. I'm just gonna throw in the to completion is important about stress. So if we never feel like the tiger is gone, then we're in a red zone. So being able to address and complete something feels good. We also have motivation. This is a learning theory, understanding that we sometimes have a fixed mindset, or we think we don't have any control, things don't change. Or we think that external rewards are the most important component of success. And really we're expanding into an intrinsic way of looking at it and understanding we have control and change. Multitasking is not actually a thing. If anyone wants to know the brain science on it, I will share. But that's one end, it's an underuse. And then we also sometimes get stuck on things. And stuck is a word that I hear guests use a lot, feeling stuck. And I think it's maybe something we all get sometimes. And that clinical term is rumination, but that thought process that keeps going. It's called incentive salience in the brain. And we have ways that we can break through. And we get to do that here with our guests. Yeah.
Could go back to that. I wanted to ask you all, how do you feel when you see these words on the slide? Emotional. So you guys are. Right.
And I want to check some people into that program. Yeah.
This was intentionally designed. You guys are actually almost like our first user test of this information. The reason that we designed it this way, that we were hoping that these words would provoke you a little bit and prompt you to identify with how you might be feeling. I personally can identify with every word on a spectrum. Right? And that actually helps normalize how you're feeling, because you realize, oh, first of all, the way I'm feeling now is not forever, that it changes. It also gives you some hope that if you are in a red zone, you don't want to be there, that there's some hope. Things are going to change eventually, and that you have the power to change it. So the reason I wanted to share that aside is that this visualization tool, we're going to work with our product and technology team to try and build some of this, because it is clearly a digital tool, but this whole movement of cursors, the red bar, the red-green scale, all of that are little aspects of the program that we're thinking of developing, and it's new and novel. We haven't seen it anywhere else in the world. The purpose of this company was always to innovate, so we think that we've got a piece of novel intellectual property here that we can patent.
Is it okay if I see names?
Recognition, yeah.
We're either diagnosing ourselves or everybody in our brothers. I think we should make Facebook stickers and slap them on.
Believe it or not, so we've thought about how this could be used for teams, and this could be used for couples.
Well, so kidding aside, and I'm sorry.
Oh.
That was jokester, but I actually see some really amazing team building opportunity here, or to make that sort of serious. If you imagine going into the meeting and having this up and basically saying, okay, here's where I am right now.
Yeah.
And because we all really deep down we know kind of we're fitting here, and then to sort of see at the end of the meeting, did it get worse? Did it get better? You know, where are we? Were we able to get into the optimal space? And if we didn't, then why didn't we? Yeah, I think from the ability to be more effective in our communication, our relationships, our approach to meetings, whatever, I think this could be a great tool.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think it's also okay to have the first checkpoint. If you feel like if we feel like we are in the red zone, is it useful? Is it useful for me to have a fixed mindset right now, or to not waste my time and energy on something? And that's an amazing tool that I've been playing with a little bit, where I can say, I feel like I'm in the red zone. And the first question isn't how do I get to green, but is why, where are the signals coming from? And can I use that energy so that I can get rid of the tiger?
Well, I think if you feel it within you and you can recognize it, sometimes it's taking a time out, break, tapping away. You feel your spirit, so you can go out and reassess and think, why am I feeling this way? Is it the person? Is it the circumstance?
Imagine if timeouts were a good thing. Okay. So we do this with the guests, and we have these built into our programs in all sorts of ways. In one-on-one sessions, the mindset guides will do metacognitive training skills. And so there's all sorts of tools based on the guest's data and what they're talking about that we get to bring into sessions. And we have classes like silent meditation where we get to really, really practice the timeout and noticing. And then, so we have regulation. Finally, we have my favorite, which is connection. There is more and more physiological and psychological data that are showing us that we are innately social beings, and that our systems, the things that our body, the information our body receives, are social in nature. And so all of these nerves have nerve endings in their afferent, they give us information in all of the cavernous spaces in our body. So when we get a gut reaction about somebody, that's actually happening in the body. And and there's a lot of ways that we can really use these tools. But first, we have to think about connection and our connection with ourselves, our connection with others, and our connection to something greater. And
Real quick, why does the self go back into the body? Just goes to the.
yeah, probably could go back. A lot of what we look at when we're looking at self is that it's in the head, right?
Not trying to put points.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. It all goes all over. See where the psychologists before us said self is really heavily cognitive, and a lot of the research, but that it's real. Okay, so our red zones around self have a lot to do with either unforgiving or a lack of identity. I think that maybe we can all think of someone, or at least a TV show character, that is in one of those red zones. But when we start to really think about what's optimal, we're able to see confidence and a level of being forgiving for ourselves. This is compassion. Kristen Neff does a whole bunch of compassion work, a lot of great interventions if anybody's interested. When we get to talking about our relationship with others, or our connection with others, this is where the dichotomy, or the two sides of the spectrum, start to become really strong, because a lot of girlfriends I know think that being independent is really important. A lot of people talk about how they're codependent in relationships, but there's not actually two ends of that. We tend to moralize it with good and bad, but it's not actually that. Instead, there's something called interdependence, and the work is burgeoning, but what we know about interdependence is that it's a healthy way of being able to be vulnerable with others and choose our relationships, not just let everybody walk on me like a doormat, is something that a number of people have said at some point in time. But also that we are able to have a level of self-sustaining choice. And that's really important, that autonomy that we saw in the first slide. And then finally, this is maybe the biggest one, definitely the hardest to talk about. It's our spirituality. It's our connection or sense of oneness. It's when we reduce and reuse, or make a choice that's good for our environment. And it's research is showing that it's crucially important as a part of wellness and well-being. So,
Okay.
yes,
Right on that.
yes,
I feel like this can't be emphasized enough. Hopefully you guys are seeing how these words kind of indicative of some things that are happening in society, the
Yeah.
polarization that's happening in society, the feeling that people are have fixed mindsets. They are either very untrusting of others. Alternatively, they have very fixed beliefs that their way is the right way, or that things have to be certain way. One thing that we've discussed, Tegan and I have discussed, is that to make it easy to understand, we present it on a screen, but this is actually three-dimensional, that there's a very fine line between being untrusting and being almost and having blind faith in a dogma or a belief or a system of thinking. And it's just a very fine line from feeling like you're not connected, you're lonely, you have nothing to believe in, and suddenly feeling like you have a leader, you have a guru, you have someone to follow.
yes.
Was it?
It's how cults happen.
That's right. This is our way of speaking to what's happening in society. It's our way of speaking and addressing to the polarization that's happening in society. And what's beautiful is that we've done it in a secular way, in a very nonpartisan way. We've done it in a way that doesn't require you to ascribe to any system of beliefs. All we're doing is describing how you might be feeling at a certain moment.
The sense of belonging, I think, fits in all of these spaces. But a sense of belonging is something we reach for sometimes. And I often see loneliness, and if we think of it like a band, loneliness, we almost immediately jump to over identifying, which can sometimes create guru mentalities, can sometimes create righteousness and puts blinders on, so we're ignorant. So we really are working towards changing the world. And there are beautiful examples of this all over property. One that I think of when I walk through the main building, which is the estate. Thank you. Is that there are areas that are consciously designed so that we can connect to others, and we'll have activities that we can do with others, even if they're strangers. And this is just a small thing. You'll see lots of small things that have such intention behind it. We also have experiences and classes that allow for a little bit more exploration here. And of course, in the one-on-one sessions, we're often talking about our relationship with ourselves, but I think it's crucially important. Brené Brown says it really well, that we can't connect to others if we're not connected to ourselves. And that came from Maya Angelou, who, well, isn't evidence-based, said we can't know others if we don't know ourselves. And I love that. So we've got this, excuse me, model of emotional well-being that is both top-down and bottom-up, that distills a whole lot of work that giants have done before us, and that works on our property in a number of different ways. And we have a way that guests can move through this program. So if a guest, this is just a sample example itinerary, if guests start with us, we have what we call a my intention. Some of you guys know what that is, but we get to really dive into the data with the guest. And then on day 2, we are already informed and the team is informed. There's all sorts of activities. These are all things that we offer already with EWP, that's just what I'm calling it, it's not official, program. They also have journal prompts and mini one-on-one sessions so that we can start with rejuvenation and work through regulation and then experience it in that silent meditation that we now really understand where that voice is coming from. And then working through connection. We have all sorts of opportunities with turn down surfaces and 4 hands massages and this beautiful surroundings to really make this experiential learning something that can be transformational and that a guest can take home. And that makes me really happy. I feel like whenever I talk about Sensei, I talk about the fact that we're person-centered and in growth. We're talking about how we can get better and not saying there's something wrong with you that we are going to fix. And we focus on the guest's data and what their life is, that context. If maybe you're in the red zone, but that is useful. And then finally, we understand that our physical state impacts our behavior and helps us change. And this really leads to emotional well-being. So it's super exciting and we're going to change the world. We have time for questions.
The experience of this film, having you present on that is emotionally inspiring. So I'm good.
Sometimes we're in, sometimes I am into this one.
You're gonna see. She's got to watch. I want horrible.
I think I have seen Tiffany in action and you're a perfect example of how we can use things like what others would call anxiety and use it to excite us and motivate us. And you're always moving forward.
It's just gentle
Getting
pressure.
stuff done.
Gentle pressure.
Awareness helps. And it's sometimes not all the time.
I would just say that he did an amazing job of taking probably a lot of science that you can talk about for weeks. And it was very easy to comprehend and connect with, and I think that's really probably agree.
Yeah, our wellness science team works really hard to distill the information. And
I would love to see the program, to like go through the program and see it, because I actually do think that a lot of our guests can benefit from it without knowledge, without really knowing that they could be. If you're not self-aware,
yeah,
which a lot of people sometimes aren't, they think they are, but they're not. I think this would be a really great eye opener and help to remind. Like I would even see myself. Then,
introspection can be really, really powerful.
and you know, self-reflection is huge, and it took me many years to learn how to do it, but it's a hard one to understand and control. Yeah, you're responsible.
Andrea and Jared.
How would you know when you're looking at PAQ or help guide
Yeah.
towards this as opposed to self-select for it? Like maybe
Yeah.
the most self-aware people would self-select because it's so important to them, and yet those who need
Yeah.
support may not.
Yeah, well, I would never want to force anyone into it. I think that this is going to be part of the learning, is being able to really communicate and I know that there were quite a few guests that I was lucky enough to meet when I was temporarily at Lanai, that they knew they wanted to work on their emotions. They didn't maybe know all of the things, but we all have a sense when we're in the red zone too long, and people learn more, you know, maybe even ask questions on the page.
Would they sign up, or would they be guided to?
That's an interesting question, if I may jump in, because by the time they get to PAQ, they have already selected who they are paid for the package. And I think that then becomes more of a dialogue when they're on property, just to say that someone has selected the OWP, the regular one. There's certainly opportunity to then recommend the EWP to them as another step. I personally, and we can talk about this, I wouldn't see us then, because of their PAQ, saying, hey, listen, you've chosen a package that might not be one for you.
We made that mistake in the past.
But
You're being too prescriptive and saying, because you said these things, we're gonna prescribe X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That's actually how we open.
is it not a way that you can train the revitalization staff, though, because in our process, we do the PAQ and then we set up a call to discuss that PAQ?
That's right. It can be.
Is there not somewhere in that little
Yeah.
interchange where you could
I
train?
think-
them?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think on the reservation side. On the reservation side, they need to be able to describe every single one of these packages and speak to them based on how they describe the package and how they recommend it. Ultimately, it's going to help them, I guess, make a choice.
But I
And
also think it's listening to get.
they got, of course,
So it's hearing what they're saying and then saying, taking the knowledge that we get from. the
Yeah.
call and
Absolutely.
taking it.
absolutely. And my sense is actually going to that it offering this, there are going to be a lot of guests who opted into the OWP because it was the only one that we had. That now are going to be able to distinguish and say, oh, you know what I'm actually really looking for is the EWP, not the EWP. So that's what.
And I think that I think that we could find a little niche, if you train the reservation, even your PAS team or PS team correctly with the right
Yeah.
knowledge and understanding of the packages, you can lead against the right one.
So I have a question always, and obviously we've already learned with the OWP on this as sensei, we don't prescribe, we don't treat, right? So we make recommendations and we encourage learning and then self-awareness and proactive behavior, change proactive behavior. And it has already happened regularly that guests who have opted into the OWP really are looking for therapy and we have to tell them this. There's even more danger with this, that the guest is going to want to get more than what we are willing to give them. How do we set that up from the beginning, that they understand how deep we'll go, or saying it differently, where we will draw the line of saying, no, this is too deep.
Yes,
You can take that.
so there are. It's important. I think at the very 30,000 feet level, our model doesn't say there's something wrong that we are trying to fix. And so from the very top, looking at all of it, we can say this isn't therapy and this isn't clinical because we aren't prescribing and we aren't fixing. We're helping you start to explore your own zones. At the base level, when Marcus and I are sitting across from a guest who wants the answer, our clinician, our practitioners are trained. Our practitioners are trained to say, I am not a clinician, and this is not therapy. If you want to tell me these things, so at the very worst, this will never ever happen, but we are trained for it. At the very worst, we're talking about suicidal ideation. And at the point where that starts, our practitioners are trained to say, if you want to go here, I am required to help refer you. And we have a script around that. But I think that all the way in between, there's spaces where we have opportunities to say, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Everything's exactly right. And let's explore more to use what you already have. And I should also say very strongly that this model is, I hate this word, but we're talking about research from neurotypical. We are not talking about clinical.
Neurotypical meaning, what is that? What is a neurotypical?
So there's a diagnostic statistical manual. Gives
Like
us
reading.
hold down things whenever you need it. But the DSM is a tool that gives us a number of symptoms and ways that something impacts functioning that creates a diagnosis. And anything that fits within all of these things, it's problematic. If you want to have coffee and talk about it someday, I'm happy to. But anything that you can diagnose is not neurotypical. It's neurodivergent. And
So like autism for example, or.
yes, exactly.
Autism, ADHD,
Okay,
any label, any diagnostic label,
okay.
we're not grappling with them. We're saying
Doomsday plus anxiety.
self-imposed labels, conditions, we can treat that, we can take it.
Just so that clock is good. Clock can be good. I was.
Oh, I'm joking.
I will share,
Not cheap.
actually, so on that spectrum, we can identify every point. So on the stress spectrum, I'm non-confrontational. I don't like to get stressed, which is why I did set up a virtual doomsday clock on my computer, because it does help me to have a little bit of fire underneath my butt to get things done. Really just. And so we can use it to our advantage to make sure that we're not getting too comfortable, that we're making sure we're focusing on our
Our
thing.
habits.
But again, kidding aside, that's using the caution has somehow disappeared now. That's okay. So we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, actually, 22 days ago, when Tiffany brought this clock in. That there are really two ways of looking at it, and now using your language, it really depends on where on the spectrum we are on how we read it, because we can look at this talk today and say, "Ooh, we only have 68 days, or we can look at it and say, we still have 68 days, guys.
Yeah.
Plenty of time. Now we need to get going, but there's 68 days. Right, and by the way, how we feel about it can change from 1 minute to the next, and one topic to the next, and what that might be, but there's no one right or wrong way of looking at it, it just depends on where we are.
Yeah. And what I love about this is that we can start to explore our symptoms and our context and understand that day-to-day is different. So is that helpful? Sarah, did you have something forever ago that?
Any other questions, comments?
Some question, comment, something. So when thinking about our consumers, and if I'm a consumer wanting to know more about this, I feel as if it's on the website and maybe even like a quick 1 to 3 minute video of a synopsis of what this program is, I would know whether this is right for me or not, versus somebody telling me, oh, you should do this, or man, this you might want to take a look at this. And I feel, in this day and age, everybody's constantly searching and researching, finding things that might fit just for them. So if this is on our website and they see this, right away they're going to say, yes, I want this, I need this, this is what I'm looking for, or no, that's not what I'm looking for. So I feel like that's an avenue that we can address it and see. And
I'm getting into a research red zone because I have been trained to pilot things. and have experience.
That's okay, I'm in the operational, that's always like, we're not ready to put this on the website.
Once we've gone through those processes, I think, yeah, you're right. It's also
Yeah, to me, that sounds like managing those expectations of the customer or the guest. And I think being able to manage that expectation throughout their journey until they get here. During that moment, they leave would be like what our jobs are.
And if someone says they're tired, you can say, we have a rejuvenation. So it goes both. What else?
Now that brings up another interesting idea, and that is that while this would be the entire 5-day program, I do see the opportunity for rejuvenation one-on-ones, connection one-on-ones that are not necessarily an entire package, but just another one-on-one opportunity.
Totally agree.
And to that, I'd be really interested to see what we can set up for our internal teams.
For the
Yeah.
for internally, yeah.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's sometimes good to asking offers for others. I came out of a relationship where I really second guessed my own thought because I had been told for so long that I was wrong. Like, you don't feel that way. You feel this way. And I'm like, okay. And so it got to a point where I'm like, am I crazy? Kind of weird here. So just having somebody to speak that through it, and they're like, no, that's not weird. It's not. It's a normal feeling. Just having this change.
I think there were so many.
Really good. I think we probably have time. 1:25. 4 minutes. Okay.
Just want to check in on her, it's a question. And
I think,
okay.
This was our first time introducing this to the broader company. We've been working on this internally. Please think about it. Think about how you feel about it. We're open and receptive to your thoughts and feedback. If you think there's a way we should explain it on the website, we're all ears. We're going to figure out how to present this together. And then ideas like, yeah, maybe there's a connection one-on-one. Maybe we don't have to open with a 5-day package. Let's start small.
But we could, even if we're not ready to roll it out as a whole package, could we start with?
Yes.
One-on-ones? Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're open and receptive to your ideas. You can reach out to Keegan directly, you can reach out to me, and then we'll synthesize this and make sure that feedback is heard, and this works for you as well as our guests, because I totally agree with you. Like, why would we develop this beautiful special thing and just keep it secret from people? Like, we have to share what we really learned.
I think that's super. I actually would love to do this with the leadership team and walk them through this and have them see it. And that's.
I'm excited to see this when we have 150 people.
Yeah.
And then in breakout sessions, I'm excited to see something like this in a different version for like maybe just a housekeeping team or just other teams to learn something that's relevant to kind of their own area. But I feel like you took such a tremendous topic and made it very digestible for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, for those of us who haven't like touched anything in this realm before. So
And Richard, you said that I would agree, just for many people, very manageable.
You guys should see Michael's skills at distilling information and nutrition. Our wellness science team works hard to do that. So thank you. And thank you, Vishal, for helping him.
I also think that so this is the first Central Porcupine Creek Lunch and Learn of what I hope will be many more.
Yes.
And we've been fortunate at the corporate office that we've had a number of lunch and learns over the last year. But to bring this concept and even if we do this, have Hawaii participate in breakfast and learn, or whatever it might be, but to open it up more virtually for really the company who can and have these recordings available to the team on their own time. I think going back to our mission of guiding the world towards greater well-being, and I look at Marcus, we've been having conversations about internal well-being for a very long time now. This is exactly the kind of stuff that not just sets us apart to the outward-facing world and our guests, but also inward-facing to who we are as a sensei wellness community. It's really powerful.
Thank you, everyone.
How about we all are in our optimum spectrum, get to work. We only have 68 minutes.
18 hours, 30 minutes. Give the
overnight.